everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a colorful aerogarden experiment video all about growing purple beans indoors. I got the idea of growing beans a couple months ago and was really curious about growing colorful beans in particular. I wanted to try growing beans that I couldn't find at the grocery store, so I picked up a couple packets, but these are the two that I planted. These Gold Rush yellow beans and these purple royal burgundy beans, and I have a whole separate video on the yellow beans which I'll link up here. I have seen the purple beans at farmers markets though, so you might be able to find these locally near you. The first issue came when I started the seeds. I planted them all directly in my aerogarden farm. I directly sowed the seeds in the sponges and planted it in the unit. And it turns out beans like a warm but relatively dry environment. So one bean plant sprouted right away. It grew nice and tall. I thought maybe the others were just a little bit slow. It turns out no, they didn't germinate because they were starting to rot. So I had to scrap the rest of them and start over. And for the second seed starting attempt, I used the paper towel method. Basically, you put the seeds in a paper towel, moisten it, and enclose it in a plastic bag, and then let the seeds germinate in a kind of dark, calm area, like a kitchen cabinet. Bean seeds are so big, it's a little tricky to fit them in the sponge. You might have to cut the sponge to get them to fit nicely. And at first I didn't know which way was up or down. These long white roots should go in the sponge, and then the bean seed itself might be curled over in the beginning, but as it grows, the plant will kind of unfurl itself and grow upwards. So because I had that one purple bean plant that sprouted and grew really nicely, that one was much farther along than all the other bean seeds that I had to start over with the second attempt. So I've had that happen a couple of times before, and what I usually do is I'll take out the one advanced plant, I'll put it in a little cup of water, stick it close to the garden so that it is benefiting from the light source, but it has its own little water capacity. I don't feed it any nutrients, I just place it alongside the machine, and then I kind of wait for the other baby seedlings to grow and catch up. So it depends on the growth difference, but in this case for the beans it took about 2 weeks for the other bean seedlings to catch up, and then I planted the advanced one back in the garden. And when it's alone in the cup, you don't feed it any nutrients. Re-top up water if the water capacity gets low. Basically you're just trying to keep it alive and kind of slow down the growth so that the other ones can catch up. So in the aerogarden I planted 6 beans, 3 Royal Burgundy and 3 Gold Rush. And one thing to keep in mind when growing beans indoors is there are 2 main types of bean seeds, or bean plants. So you have pole beans and bush beans. Pole beans are kind of like the original type of bean. They're a climbing bean, so they grow really tall. Think like Jack the Beanstalk. They basically keep growing for the whole season and they don't stop. Bush beans are the opposite. They stay kind of low and bushy, and you want to look for bush beans if you're going to grow beans indoors. I got all of my bean seeds from Botanical Interest. I'll link them below. They have a lot of great heirloom vegetable varieties, and for beans in particular you want to check the seed description on the website page, and usually it'll indicate whether it's a pole bean or bush bean type. Bush beans generally top out at around 2 feet in height, but in my experience growing these, they didn't seem to get taller than 12 to 18 inches, so definitely a very compact, container-friendly type of vegetable. And the Royal Burgundy beans were a really interesting plant. The leaves are kind of this bright minty green, and the stems and the stalks are like a deep purple, so just a really pretty plant to grow indoors, very visually distinctive. I found it a little tricky to maintain these plants, especially when it came to nutrition. Bean plants seem to be a bit more delicate and finicky about their nutrient requirements compared to other vegetables that I've grown in the past. I started the plants off on a 14-day feeding schedule, but ended up scaling it back to roughly every 21 days, every 3 weeks or so. Beans are rich in nitrogen and tend to add nitrogen to the soil, so when people plant them outside, they'll companion plant it with vegetables that require lots of nitrogen. But in an indoor hydroponic environment, I planted the farm entirely with just beans, and it seemed to be a little bit of an overkill. They didn't seem to need very much nutrition, so scaling it back seemed to enable them to thrive a little bit better. What they did need was a lot of water. The beans could easily go through a full tank of water in a couple days. I didn't have an airboard at the time to attach to the farm, but it got to be such a pain to manually top up the water that I have since bought a couple more airboard tanks. These are really handy. They have an extra liter of water, so they basically double the amount of water that the machine can hold. And I just find them really, really handy. So now I have one for each farm. The nice thing about them is not only do they simplify the watering process and extend out the schedule, but they also mean that you can kind of leave the plants alone for about 2 to 3 weeks and they'll still thrive. So if you need to go on vacation or go away for work or whatever, the airboards are quite handy. It also took quite a while to see baby beans. I ended up adding phosphorus, some bloom fertilizer. I'll link the exact one I used in the description box. To be honest, it seemed to stress the plants out, but it also did result in a ton of flowers forming, so I'm not really sure if I would recommend using too much of it. Be very careful with the dosage amount. The flowers on the Burgundy bean plant are really pretty. They're a kind of bright fuchsia. They're very small, or otherwise they would be like very cute for like a bouquet or something. And the baby beans, when they start forming, they're really cute. They're kind of tiny, tiny little miniature string beans. They're bright green in color, but they have this kind of dark purple outline to them that makes them look really unique. And then they gradually turn from green to darker and darker to like a deep, rich purple. Just overall, I thought this plant was really distinctive looking. It makes it really easy to see the beans against all the green foliage, so also an easy one when it comes to harvest time. One thing I did not realize about bush beans is that they tend to produce the bulk of their harvest once. So pole beans, because they keep growing, they continue to have the resources to produce new beans. Bush beans, they tend to have one main harvest, and then they will produce beans after that, but just not nearly as many as the one initial main growth stage. So if you really love beans and you want enough to eat to last for the whole season, then I would recommend succession planting, or like staggering and always planting new ones every week or so. I feel like that's a little tricky to do in an indoor environment, so I did not do that. But here's what the plants looked like when they were full with beans, and I thought it was enough for one person. But yeah, depending on how much you love beans, you may want to plant more. I also was really happy with the production. I felt like each of these Royal Burgundy plants produced quite a number of beans, given the small size of each plant. And so yeah, these were definitely more productive, and I got a lot of beans off of them. I think I could have gotten even more beans if I had been a little bit better about consistently watering the plants and figuring out the nutrition. In general, the younger the bean, the more tender it tastes, so harvest these when they're kind of a good size, maybe about 5 to 6 inches in length. The longer you wait, the tougher the bean gets. The more mature it gets, it starts to produce little seeds inside and have these like bumpy ridges. So if you prefer a kind of more tender tasting bean, then don't be afraid to harvest on the earlier side. In general, Royal Burgundy is one of the faster growing bean varieties, so from seed to harvest, you should have beans in about under 60 days, more like 50. You can also save the seeds. Beans are one of the easiest vegetables to save seeds from. I didn't do that, I ended up eating them all, but I did save seeds from my Gold Rush yellow bean plants. So if you want to see how to save them, you can check out that video. And yeah, the pods themselves were this really, really pretty, like deep purple magenta color. It almost had kind of a sheen to it, a little bit silvery, shimmery shine. So I just thought they were really pretty and really distinctive. But one thing to note is the purple color is slightly misleading. So the color is due to anthocyanins in the outer skin of the bean pod, but on the inside, the interior flesh is green from chlorophyll in the plant. All vegetables have chlorophyll. And at high temperatures, the anthocyanins start to break down. So when you cook purple beans, they actually turn from purple to green, and they lose that really rich, vibrant purple color, which is a little bit of a shame. It's kind of a fun transition to watch when you're cooking them, but it's also like slightly disappointing because the whole reason you're growing these is for the color. So yeah, just something to keep in mind at higher cooking temperatures. Once they're exposed to heat, the purple dyes kind of die out, and all you're left with is a green bean. I don't have any cold bean recipes. Maybe you could pickle them. Do people pickle beans? I think they do. So yeah, unfortunately these very pretty, unique beans end up looking a little bit ordinary on the plate. but if you wanted to preserve the color, you could probably just try eating them in like a cold format, like basically raw. I feel like on a veggie platter, some crudité, some hummus and dip, these would be really good. I actually did eat a couple of them raw. They're super crunchy and sweet and tender, so they taste really good even in raw format. And yeah, that's everything from my bush bean experiment. If you have grown beans indoors or in any kind of hydroponic environment, let me know your experience. I did get some really helpful advice from people on TikTok, but I got the advice after I had grown these, so unfortunately it was a bit of a trial and error. But that's the nice thing about social media. You get a lot of really helpful advice and feedback from people. So yeah, drop me a comment if you have some tips, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.